Oh, it smells amazing in here right now. As long as it's cooked well through, just like so, we can pull it apart, and now we've got a great house for the rest of the ingredients inside. Guten Yardening, everybody! Well, we're out here in our front garden space because tonight for dinner I want to make a dish that's really simple, and it's not our original recipe. It's something we found, and we'll definitely give credit for that, but a dish where I can find almost every single ingredient right here in our front garden space, and I want to take you along on that journey. But I also want to point something else out. We're not a cooking channel, so we don't always show you the meals that we prepare with our food, but I want to assure you that we're growing all of this food for us to use. It's a big part of our budgeting. It's a big part of what we feed our family. And that's such an important thing to keep in mind, because we're not just doing this to show you how to grow food, we're also doing it for our benefit, for the benefit of all of our family. So today I'm going to harvest a few of the vegetables that we have ready to go out front, and I'm going to show you a really simple way that we keep ourselves fed. Now, we planted several different varieties of eggplant, and I don't really think the variety matters as much as making sure you pick an eggplant or have eggplant that's big enough to handle the additional food that we're going to put in here. This is absolutely perfect sized for what we're doing. Now, this recipe calls for 4 eggplant, but just like about every other recipe we make, we take what we have and we modify the recipe. Now, we do have plenty of eggplant, so we're going to keep that the same, but some ingredients may be different depending on what we have. That has to be one of the coolest that I've seen. Take a look at that eggplant. Look at that swirling effect, those striations there. And with this one, we have 4. So these are our 4 eggplant, and now we need to get 2 peppers. Now, the recipe actually calls for 2 bell peppers and then a chili, something a little bit hotter. Well, we don't typically like a lot of spice. Well, the rest of my family doesn't like a lot of spice, so I'm gonna go for one of these nice size bell peppers we have here, and then one of these purple beauty bell peppers. So dark, I'm sure in this lighting it looks almost black. This is one of my favorite bell peppers for sure. I love the taste. Really nice, solid walls, thick walls on this. And so now we have the pepper part of what we need, and we need to get a tomato. Now, while we have a lot of tomatoes growing out front, I'm actually just going to go for these Ruckers that I have that are just covering this plant, because a couple of them have been on here a little bit too long. We're not going to waste these. You can see what's happened. We really need to get the rest of these harvested off here. A couple of these we're having a little bit of a problem with, but these are going to become seeds for next year. And these have been such great producers, there's no reason why we wouldn't want to grow these again. But this is a perfect tomato, perfect for what we need for this recipe. Now, technically, the recipe doesn't call for onion. We actually have a couple of onions that we planted kind of late in the season, and I love fresh onions. So this is going to be added. This beautiful red onion is going to be added to the recipe. Now, the last ingredient on the list is parsley. Well, I don't have any parsley growing out front, but what I do have is some basil. So I'm going to harvest a little bit of basil. Even though I know this tends to be a pretty powerful tasting plant, I think because the recipe itself is going to have a nice strong taste, this will go along quite nicely. Just take a look at all those beautiful colors. This is going to be a delicious and wonderful dish where we're tasting the different colors of the rainbow, just like we did in our main harvest a few weeks ago. Well, let's go ahead and get these inside so we can get this recipe started. All right, I've got most of our ingredients right here. Everything that you see here, except for the oil, is from our garden. This garlic is from the back garden, so I guess technically not from the front garden. Now, there are a couple of ingredients that we don't produce here. The Parmesan cheese I'm going to use, the bread, and then salt and pepper, but everything else here is from our garden. What I'm going to do to start this off, I'm just going to peel this back a little bit. I'm not actually going to take the stem off, and then I'm going to peel the top portion of the eggplant. And I'm just, again, trying to get that top portion off so that it's exposed from underneath the skin. So something like that. That's perfect, and I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of these. I'm going to go ahead and clear off the rest of these veggies until we're ready for them. Now, this recipe calls for 4 eggplant, but I'm sure that you can modify it depending on the total number of eggplant you have. And you'll notice that I'm definitely using multiple varieties, and I'm just putting a little bit of olive oil over top of these. That tends to be the oil, that or avocado oil tends to be the type we use. Now, once I have the oil on, I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of sea salt on top for flavoring. And then that's going in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit or about 200 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes. All right, now I need 2 peppers, and I already told you I've chosen 2 that I think are nice and colorful. And for our peppers, we generally save the seeds, and I will definitely be doing that with these. I mean, for a pepper like this with all of those seeds inside, it would be really hard for me to try to get rid of that, especially for a pepper that looks so nice and has grown so well for us this year. So I'm going to save these seeds, and then I'm going to cut these up into smaller pieces. And I'm definitely saving the seeds from this purple beauty. There's tons inside. Look how thick the wall is for these. Now once I get these all sliced up, these are actually going to go into our food processor to chop them up even further. And that is exactly what I'm looking for. I really wish you could smell what I'm smelling. I love the smell of bell pepper. All right, we're going to take our tomato and we're going to do basically the same thing. You know, as I look at this, I think I might want more tomatoes, so I'm going to cut down a second tomato as well. Now this is where I'm going to deviate from the recipe that we're going to have linked as well, because I've got my tomato and the recipe doesn't call for onion, but I'm going to put a half an onion in because I absolutely love onion with this type of dish. And so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to chop it up just like so, because that's going to go into the food processor. And these garlic cloves are actually a little bit smaller, so I'm putting 2 in instead of 1 like the recipe calls for. Put our fresh basil in there. I've got that in there now. I'll chop it up just a little bit more. And now we're good to go. Now the recipe calls for some hard bread, but I just have some day-old bread that I got at the store. It asks for 2 slices. I'm just going to take this. I'm going to take off the outer part and cut it into small cubes. Now I'm sure you can figure out which kind of bread will work best for you, but basically what I'm going for is something about that size. Alright, I've taken my bread, I've placed it in this bowl, and I'm going to just mix all the ingredients together. Now one other thing, and I mentioned this earlier in the harvest, that I'm not adding to this recipe is any kind of hot pepper. And that's because, well, I like hot peppers. Nobody else in my family really does. So we will make it to suit. And all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mix this together, just like so. And while I'm mixing it, I'm going to add in about 3 tablespoons of grated Parmesan cheese. I absolutely love cheese, and so does the rest of my family. So we've got this all mixed in. Oh, it smells amazing in here right now. So once this is all mixed up, we're just waiting for about 4 more minutes, and our eggplant should be out of the oven. All right, one more thing. You'll notice I didn't put any additional salt and pepper here. That is certainly up to you. We're trying not to use too much salt in our house though, so I didn't add any extra there, but salt and pepper to taste at this point. All right, one thing to notice is I do have different sizes and thicknesses in here. If you use all the same kind, it'll probably be a little bit easier to get that consistent cooking. But I'm just going to dig into one of these real quick so you can see what it looks like and what we're going for. You should be able to pull it apart like this. It's a little bit hot right now. Obviously, it just came out of the oven. But pull it apart right here, because what we're going to do is we're going to put this in as a stuffing. So as long as it's cooked well through, just like so, we can pull it apart, and now we've got a great house for the rest of the ingredients inside. Now what I ended up doing is actually cutting these a little bit diagonally for the bigger ones, just to make sure I had enough room to fit everything in here, you know, to get it down in here. These are a lot easier. Again, they spread open pretty easily there. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill this up. I'm gonna use every bit of it. I just tasted it. It's so good. So I'm gonna use every bit of it to get inside here. All right, we've got everything in there. It looks, I'm sure it's going to taste magnificent. And so I'm just going to add just a tiny bit of olive oil across the top of this, and 1 more sprinkle of Parmesan. I don't think you can go wrong with Parmesan cheese. And then this is going back in the oven for 20 more minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, about 45 minutes after starting, this is our finished product. Super easy to make. It smells amazing. I'm going to take one of these outside. It's so beautiful out. I'm going to go out to the garden where I started, and I'm going to sample this with you. Well, we're back out front where all of this harvest started, right here by the eggplant, which gave us these delicious eggplant, and I'm about to try this on for size. So we'll see how this tastes. I'm confident, though, based on the way it smells, this has got to be delicious. All right, bon appetit. That's amazing. This, super easy, really nice on an evening when you don't have a lot of time, but you got ingredients fresh from the garden. This is fantastic. And I've made enough for the rest of my family as well. So we're gonna enjoy our garden harvest. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe. Most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.